and of course skyrocketing operational costs and higher fuel costs. For more on this, we have Vivek Iyer with us. Thank you so much for joining me. Give us a sense of what we're looking at if this were to continue, the kind of sustained pressure that we're seeing on the airlines at the moment. What do you reckon is going to be the larger impact of this?
Well, that's right. Especially when you're talking about crude oil prices, remember, India is the net importer as far as crude oil prices is concerned. Not just crude oil, we also import a significant amount of natural gas as well. So any sector, any company, that depends on crude oil, on petrol, as an importer, will face significant margin pressures, which is what you're seeing pan out, especially in the aviation space. Remember, there are two listed entities in the aviation space in India, both Interglobe Aviation, that goes by the name of Indigo, and SpiceJet. Both of these companies, both of these stocks are facing significant margin pressure. They are seeing flight cancellations as well, so it's a double whammy. Flight cancellations plus rising input costs, both of them will lead to significant margin pressure. Now, talking about the markets on an overall basis, remember, coming into trade today, we did expect there to be significant damage. Why are we saying that? Because overnight, especially on Friday, you did see most of the US markets, most of the European markets end with deep cuts. Along with that, oil prices, something that we track, have now topped close to the $120 a barrel mark. Now, this spells negative news across most of Asian equities. And today morning, you did see Kospi, which is the South Asian, the Korean market, down almost 7.5%. So we expected markets to be quite weak, and which is what has happened, almost 2.8 to 3% lower. That's right.
Absolutely. As you mentioned, this is very much on expected lines also. But that being said, when we talk about the market jitters, how do you read that going forward?
Well, a lot of things that one needs to keep an eye out for. One of the impacts that we've just discussed is the impact of crude oil prices. Let's just spell out what it means for Indian equities when crude oil prices go up. What are the big worries for India when crude oil prices, go much above the $100 a barrel mark? Number one, the current account deficit spikes up. Remember, the Indian Rupee already is a significantly underperforming currency, especially when you compare it to Asian markets. The Indian Rupee today at a fresh record low against the dollar, and against a rising import bill, the Indian Rupee, the value goes lower. And along with that, remember, when you're looking at FMCG companies, biscuit companies, paint companies, aviation companies, most of the companies, even if you look at a name like an MGL or an IGL, where you go to fill up your gas or petrol, even OMCs like HPCL, BPCL, where you go and fill up, your car's tank, most of these companies actually use either crude oil or a derivative of crude oil as their input. And these companies, all of them, will face significant margin pressure. So at one point of time, you will see inflation come up, if this particular situation escalates. The government, however, has gone ahead and made a lot of comforting remarks. They've said that we have significant reserves of oil as well as natural gas, so they don't expect prices at the pump or the retail prices that you and me would pay for our cars. They don't expect that to go higher significantly, but at one point of time, if this goes on for a prolonged period of time, you will face issues. Now, along with that, remember, a lot of Indian companies do have exposure to the Middle East. A lot of Indian companies do go ahead and export goods, services, manufacturing products to the Middle East. So just to give you an example, India is one of the largest exporters of rice to the Middle East, to West Asia. So all of these companies, a name like Larsen & Toubro, India's largest capital goods company, has significant presence there. Almost 40% of its top line comes in from there. So a lot of these companies will be impacted. A name like Adani Ports, they have an asset in Israel at Haifa. So that gets, there are a lot of reports indicating that that's been impacted. So a lot of destruction, a lot of damage, and a lot of uncertainty currently.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for bringing us all the updates on that as well. So as of early March 2026, US gas prices, they've been experiencing significant volatility, with the national average for regular gasoline recently jumping to around $3.41 a gallon, driven by